free to stop me as I go through. And I just said to Jennifer, I'm hoping it will take about 45 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions at the end as well. But since it's just us, feel free to ask questions as I go through. I'm going to share my screen. All right, are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to talk about basically the post-award part of the grants process. So after you receive a grant and you are managing that grant, what tools do we have available at Upstate and as part of the USC system to help with managing it? So I'm going to bring attention to Upstate resources and USC resources. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to write the proposal so that it's easier to manage. Where to start when you get a new grant. There'll be some documentation that you get that will help prepare you to manage the award. Some common problem areas that we see, and then what to do when it comes time at the end of the grant to close out the account. Okay, so resources, and I believe Jennifer posted the slides in the chat or attached them to this meeting, so they should be available through Teams, and these should all be active links. And I believe I double checked all the links to make sure that they are the updated correct links. So I've got a link here to the Sponsored Awards and Research Support page, and then a direct link to Sponsored Awards. A lot of what is listed on the Sponsored Awards page goes directly to the Sponsored Awards management page. So that would be things like fringe benefit rates. When you are writing in salary to a grant budget, you also need to write in the fringe benefits. So that's the South Carolina retirement, Social Security taxes, workers' comp, health insurance costs, all of those kinds of things. Those rates are always updated every 6 months, roughly. So I always encourage people to bookmark that page where those are listed because they update them so often. A lot of times people will write a proposal and use the same fringe rate that they used when they wrote a different grant 2 years ago. Well, the fringe rates are probably different. So it's a good idea to go ahead and just bookmark that page so that you can have access to the current rates. Indirect cost rates, that would be how much overhead we can write into the grant budget. Basically, sometimes you'll see it called facilities and administrative costs. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then on the Sponsor Awards management page, they have a grant budget preparation guide that just kind of walks you through all the categories. You know, it just helps you think about what you might need in a budget. Of course, we're happy to help to meet with you and talk through that as well. But that's a resource that's out there that shows you how to calculate the costs for a variety of different line items that are likely to be included in your budget. And then, of course, they have links to USERA to submit proposals, and also if you need to make changes to an existing award, I'll talk about that later as well. We can do that through USERA now as well. That's a relatively new addition that we have in USERA. And then also have links to the Office of Research and Grant Development in Columbia, and that is where the Aspire and the RISE programs are housed. So the guidelines and the forms and everything for RISE and Aspire, generally we send out notices when those become available, but all that information will be posted on the Research and Grant Development page as well. If you are ever doing a project that involves human subjects or animal subjects, I didn't put that here because we don't have very many animal subjects, but human subjects, IRB review, training to use the IRB. All of that information is housed at the Research Compliance Office in Columbia. So again, something else to maybe think about bookmarking if you plan to do projects that include any human subjects. Grants and Funds Management is the office in Columbia that does all of the financial billing and reporting for us on our grant accounts. They also have links to, I talked about USC resources to help you manage your grant. So there are multiple ways that you can actually see what has been posted to your account, what your budget is, the expenses that have posted, payroll that has posted. So those can be linked from the SARS webpage, but also from Grants and Funds Management in Columbia. So you can access the Finance Intranet, PeopleSoft. The other nice thing that Grants and Funds Management has put up relatively recently is checklists for account closeout. So they have like a, what should you do 90 days before your grant ends? What should you do 30 days before your grant ends? And what should you do, I think it's 15 days after the grant ends. So final wrap up kind of stuff. Generally, you will have 30 to 90 days after the grant ends before you have to submit your final report. So that 15 days after checklist can help prepare you to gather the information that you might need in order to do that final reporting to the grantor. All right, so preparing the budget to make it easier to manage. You want to be as specific as you can when you are writing the budget. You know, we know things change. I mean, a lot of times when you are writing a grant, using the best information that you have available to you is still maybe 6 or 8 months before you are actually working on the project. And obviously the cost of things can change. So you want to be as detailed as you can, but grantors understand that sometimes things have to be reworked, money needs to be moved around, but having that level of detail in the budget will make it easier to make those changes, move stuff around, and that's why I recommend using the Sponsored Awards Management budget prep guide, because it can really help you understand some of the big issues to think about in terms of, if there is equipment in the budget, that's something to think about. If there are participant costs, there are some questions that will be raised as a result of that. So I don't want to get too into the weeds, but it just kind of walks you through what to think about when you're doing that. And the more that you have put that thought in at the beginning, the easier it will be to manage the grant once you get it. All right, so I talked about the fringe rates. This is the current rate as of right now, from July through December of this year. The current rate for faculty salaries is 31.04% of salary is the current fringe rate. But as I say, that changes every 6 months. And so that's why I recommend bookmarking the page. But this gives you a breakdown. You can see that the vast majority of that goes into the retirement. But then Social Security taxes, unemployment comp, workers' comp. Health insurance is not included here. A lot of the time when faculty are getting salary written into grants, it is summer salary. And so you pay for your health insurance over the 9-month period of the academic year. So there's no additional cost for health insurance in the summer. But for example, if you were going to write in some academic year salary, then we would need to think about health insurance costs. And that's all broken out on the fringe benefit page. It shows you, if you're covering just yourself, or if you're covering yourself and your spouse, or yourself, your spouse, and your children. It shows you each category and what the cost is of health insurance for each of those categories. Then for the indirect cost rates, I've got a link directly here to the agreement. Some grantors will ask that we attach a copy of our agreement when we submit the grant. And then I also have the current indirect cost rates, as I say, sometimes called F&A, Facilities and Administrative Costs. And so these are the current rates for all of the system campuses. So that would be Upstate, Beaufort, Aiken, all of those campuses. We are at 38% for research, 36% for training, 49.5% for instruction. We don't really do any clinical trials here, but if we did, it would be a reduced rate at 25%. So, and again, these change. It's not as frequently as the fringe rates change. You can see here that this is showing 19 through 21. It's actually still in effect right now, but it may change next year, the indirect cost rate. So it's usually 3 or 4 years between the changes to the indirect cost rate. So not quite as frequently as the fringe rates change. All right, so the people get excited when they get a grant, and that's fantastic. You will get an email that looks sort of like this, that will say, we are setting up an account for your project, and it will give you that it's funded by the National Science Foundation, and it has $595,000 in direct costs and $46,000 in F&A costs. And the start date is October 1 of 2020. So congratulations on the receipt of the award. So this is the first thing that you may get to know that you have been awarded. When you get that, they will also, the folks at the Sponsored Awards Management Office in Columbia will set up an award in USARA. So you would have submitted your proposal in USARA, but now we will also have an award in USARA. And you see here, this is the award number. This is the key account number that you need to know. Project number is what we call it, to be able to find information about your grant. But then you'll see here that it links to the proposal that you submitted. So this, because this is red, this is a screenshot, but if this were live, it would be a hyperlink, and you would be able to see the proposal and all of the attachments that you submitted in order to get the award. And it also shows you the project period. So this is a 5-year grant, and the total amount funded by the National Science Foundation, and Dr. Bismarck in the School of Ed is the PI for this particular grant. All right, so now you have this grant and you have all this money. What do you do with it? So grant funds are actually more restricted than departmental funds. Sometimes people think they can just, go spend that money. But we need to follow all of the normal purchasing requirements that we have to follow spending departmental money, because we have to be able to show the track record. How did we spend that money? We have to document everything for the grantor so that we can report back to them and say, yes, we spent this much on personnel, we spent this much on supplies. We have to be able to document all of that. So having that paper trail of going through the university purchasing system, charging the expenditures to the grant account, that's how we do all of that. So any changes or amendments to the grant need to come through this office so that we are aware that changes are being made. And I always recommend to people that they, check. We will send monthly statements out of this office. If you have a grant award, we'll send you a monthly statement so that you can see what has been charged to the grant. And we ask people to check those and just make sure that everything that's posting to the grant is posting in the right place. We'll also send you a payroll report if there's payroll on your grant, so you'll see who has been paid from the grant for that month. I also recommend to people that they keep a spreadsheet so that they can compare what you think your expenses are with what the university system is showing your expenses are. That's sometimes a way that people can find that something is being charged to them that doesn't belong to them, or that something's missing that they thought they had spent. So I think this is a really good, just the same way that you would track your own personal expenses. You don't just rely on the bank to tell you this is how much money you have. You track yourself so that you can compare and say, yes, I thought that's how much I had, and that's what the bank says I have too. So same idea. All right, so setting up those spreadsheets to help you track expenses. The university's accounting system can help you. It will show you your revenue and expenditures. It will show payroll charges, Visa purchasing card charges. One thing that I do want to say is I do have a purchasing card. So if you have grant and you need to buy, smaller items up, what is it? I think it's up to 10,000 on the purchasing card that we can buy. Maybe it's 5,000. I've forgotten. Anyway, whatever it is, I'm happy to use my purchasing card to buy those things. If you need, a few $100s at a time worth of supplies, I can buy those and then reallocate it directly to your grant account. So some folks like to handle that in their own departments, and in a lot of the departments, the administrative assistant will have a purchasing card, and he or she can do that, reallocate the charges directly to your grant account. That's great. But if you don't have somebody in your department who can help you, then we're happy to help you with that in this office. It will also allow you to track any purchase orders, travel authorizations, payment requests, printing and postage charges, any of those things that have actually charged to your account. One key thing since we've moved to PeopleSoft, if there is not money in an account code, so the way that PeopleSoft works is that every dollar that's in your grant is set up in an account. So there'll be an account for personnel, there'll be an account for supplies, so there'll be an account code for equipment. If there's no money in that account code, PeopleSoft will not let you submit a payment to that account code. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So you want to be sure that there is money budgeted in that account so that you can spend it. And that's something we can help if you need to reallocate things, if things got charged to the wrong account code, we can help fix that if you find that that's a problem. That's relatively easy, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, about how we can move stuff around from account code to account code. Okay, if the grant provides salary, please work with us, and we will include Human Resources and Mike Moten in the budget office to make sure that we get all the forms submitted properly to get people paid. And some grants have cost shares, so this might be, we're using the grant funds to buy materials and supplies and pay for travel, but we're cost sharing part of somebody's time. So they're still being paid from departmental accounts, but we want to report their time on the grant. So cost sharing codes, we have to do payroll documents to add those cost sharing codes as well. So that's something that we can help you with. We must maintain all grant records for at least 5 years after the grant ends. So if you don't have storage space and you have a bunch of materials once your grant is over, we have some storage in this down the hall on our floor here, so we can save some boxes. And if you need to make arrangements to get boxes moved over here so that we can store them for you, that is another option that we offer as well, because we have to maintain those records in case there is an audit request. They can come back to us up to 5 years after the grant ends and ask for backup. And then no pressure, but the university could lose all of our financial aid if we don't manage federal funds properly. So obviously that would put the university out of business. We don't want to be in that situation at all. So we want to be sure that we're being good stewards of the federal money that we have been awarded. And that's what we're here to help you do. All right, so when you get an award, you will get that notice from USERRA, and you'll be able to log into USERRA and see the award information. In there, you should check that your name and contact information are correct, because if the grantor is trying to get in touch with you, they will be using that information. So make sure it's right. Make sure the starting and ending dates are what you thought they would be. Make sure the budget line items and the total award amount are what you thought you were getting. There should be some terms and conditions attached. Generally, that will tell you when your reports are going to be due, whether you have to do quarterly progress reports, annual reports, just a final report. That should be detailed in the award documentation, and that will always be available in USERRA, so you can access that anytime that you need to through USERRA. All right, some key grant paperwork that you need to know about. So the grant award notice, this is what comes from the grantor to say, yes, we're going to give you this money. Then USERRA will generate an account memo that sets up the account, and that's when you will get that email from USERRA. You can log in and see the account memo. USERRA will also have a budget memo that shows you how the budget is broken down in line items. Then Finance Intranet is what we use to run the grant dashboard report, which is basically like your bank statement for the grant. So this is what the USERRA budget memo looks like. So you can see here's the USERRA tag up at the top. This is for this account. And you can see that this was set up in June of 2020. And these are the account codes that I was talking about. And here's the explanation of what each one is. So 52024 is travel. And we have $3,300 budgeted for travel. So I hope this makes sense. It just kind of shows you each category, gives you a total. This USC line right here, this is the F&A costs or the indirect costs. And then your total award is $644.91. So that's what the budget memo looks like in USERRA. And then this is what the grant dashboard looks like. So these would be the same amounts here in this budget column. Oop, I didn't mean to go back, but oh, sorry, I went forward. So here we have personnel, $60,195. So if we look at the next page, here we have salaries, $60,195. So it matches up, it's the same, just formatted differently, because this is not just showing you the budget, it's also showing you what you've spent this month, what you've spent since the grant started, and what you have left available. So your balance, and then if there's something in process, it will show up here as encumbered. And then, you know, in this instance, there's nothing in this encumbered column, so the balance and the available balance are the same. But if there were some things that were in process, this column would be subtracted to get a different number in the available balance column. But this shows you your total expenses. It breaks out the indirect or the F&A costs. So you can see exactly, and this is the report that we'll send out of our office every month. So as I said, we'll send that monthly, but anytime you want to, you can access your own account, pull it up in Finance Intranet or in PeopleSoft Finance. HCM is what we use to manage payroll. So all of those may be part of the process of managing your grant. And again, we're happy to sit with you, walk you through how to pull those reports, all of that kind of stuff. I think I've already talked about that. So as I said, we'll send that monthly statement. We would love for you to check over those and help us catch problems, because we used to be able to submit corrections 90 days after the fact, but Columbia now wants us to manage it within 30 days after something posting in the wrong place. So that's why we used to send out reports quarterly, but when Columbia said, oh, we really need to get these in sooner, that's when we switched to trying to send out the reports every month. so that we're helping people catch those problems within 30 days. All right, if you have any salary in a grant, if you're paying anybody from a grant, then you will need to get into that HCM system. This is where you would be approving timesheets for people. You would have to click on the manager self-service and go into the time and absence work center to approve the hours that people submit that they are working on a grant project. And then every 6 months, we also have to certify grant time and effort. So if you're a PI on a grant, if you're the principal investigator, the project director of a grant, you will need to come in here to my homepage within HCM twice a year. Usually it's in March and September, or February and August, somewhere around there. And we will be certifying for the previous 6 months. So this is anytime anybody is paid from a grant, these reports are generated. And this is so that it's basically an internal control, so that we are demonstrating to the grantors that the people we are charging to the grants are actually working on the grants. There have been some instances in the past of universities charging salaries to grants. And when auditors asked those people who were being charged, they didn't know about the grant project. So the university was just offsetting salaries without having somebody work on a project. And that's a no-no. The federal funds or the grant funds should be paying the people who are doing the work of the grant. So that's why we have to do the certification process twice a year. And to get into any of these, to get into USERA, to get into Finance Intranet, to get into PeopleSoft, you will need to use the university single sign-on and the Duo app to authenticate and log in to those. So they all use the same login system. Okay, grants management, common problems that we see. I'm happy to say that we have definitely made some improvements over the last few years, and a lot of these things we're not seeing as frequently as we used to, which is great. But sometimes people forget to move salary. You know, if we said we're going to charge 20% of somebody's time to the grant and we didn't get the paperwork processed, that's why we're sending you that payroll report every month, so that you can be sure that people who are supposed to be getting paid are actually getting paid from the grant. We had an instance over the summer, we had some student workers who did not enter their time and didn't get paid and didn't tell anybody they hadn't gotten paid. And we didn't find out until the PI got the payroll report for I think it was June or July, and said, wait, I'm supposed to be paying X number of students and there are only Y number of students on this report. So what happened to the others? And that's when we tracked down that they hadn't been entering their hours. So we're trying to help with all of that to make it easier for you to track these things. TAs now really are only required if you're traveling internationally. Generally, you otherwise do not need a travel authorization before you travel. But it's a good idea to get in touch with us and just make sure, because, you know, with all of the COVID restrictions on travel, there are still some limitations. So just to be on the safe side, I think it's a good idea to just check with our office before you travel with grant funds, just to be sure. Somebody bought something on a purchasing card and didn't reallocate it to the grant account. So those things, you know, if we find it in a timely fashion, we can move it and charge it to the grant. So that, again, that's why we're sending those statements out. Journal entries not done to make changes, and then not keeping enough backup records. We need to justify the things that we are charging to a grant. We need to justify why we are charging them, how they relate to the project. So you want to have, you know, in your emails, you want to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So if you have questions about any of these things, you can always contact me or Jennifer in the SARS office, or Mike Moten in the budget office. We work very closely with Mike. He's the one who processes the journal entries for us, helps us make corrections, all of those things. So we work very closely with him. So you can reach out to any of us to get help with that, which is good because, you know, if one of us is out on vacation, hopefully the others can step in and answer the questions. All right, budget revisions. If you, let's say you were going to buy a piece of equipment on a grant, and when you wrote the grant, the equipment was $15,000. But now, 8 months later, that you've actually been awarded and you're ready to start the project, now the equipment costs $10,000. So you've got $5,000 that you need to move somewhere else. So we can actually do that through USERRA. So first of all, you want to check your terms and conditions in your award, because some grantors, as long as you don't go over your bottom line, if you got $100,000, they don't really care what categories you spend it in. Some grantors very much care which categories you spend it in. So that's why knowing what your particular grant's terms and conditions say is really important. But you may or may not have enough flexibility to just make that change without even submitting a budget revision. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you do need to submit a budget revision. So you're going to create a memo justifying that change. Why do I need to move this money? And so in this case, it would just be the equipment costs less now than I had budgeted, and I want to move the money into a different category and use it for something else. So we would go into USERRA, and I'll show you the screenshot in just a minute, and then attach the justification, and then I will approve it, and then it goes to the SAM office in Columbia for them to approve. And if they need to send it to the grantor, they will do that as well to request the okay to make the change. So you want to keep track of all your spending, and check it as regularly as you can to make sure things are posting appropriately. So let's say we need to go, I'm sticking with the same grant. This is still Dr. Bismarck's grant. But if you come back in here to your award summary page in USERRA, you'll see over here. So I talked about being able to view your award documentation. This is where you would do that. And the USERRA account memorandum, you can print it right here. But right now what I'm talking about is this request post-award action. So this will allow you to do two things. You can either request a change to your end date for the grant, or you can request to rebudget the grant. So you just click on that, and it will take you to a screen that looks like this. And so in this case, I checked yes, I want to change the budget end date. So it's going to show you what the date currently is and ask you to enter what you want the new date to be. We've had a good many of these recently because of COVID. We've had people requesting extensions on their grants. 6 months or a year or whatever. So you would just put in what you want your new end date to be. And then you would add your justification. And right here, it tells you what you need to include in that justification. So, explain why you need the new end date. How are you going to spend the money that's left over during that period? So I think all of this basically makes sense. And you would just attach that, and then you would submit it, and it will come to me for approval, as I say, and then it goes to Columbia for approval. So that's the first kind of post-award action. The second kind is if you need to rebudget. So here I've said, yes, I want to rebudget. And what this will do is show you your current budget, and it wants you to subtract. So let's just say we're going to reduce our supplies line here from $16,000 to $12,000. So I would type in -$4,000 into this line, and then add that $4,000 to whatever line I wanted to add it to. Because they want the balance of the adjustments to come out to zero, if that makes sense. So you've got to reduce one line item so that you can increase another. So that's how that works. All right, so closing grants. As I said, Grants and Funds Management does all the financial reporting for us, which is awesome. So we work with them. They do the billings, they do financial reporting. So you as the grant project director, you'll have to do the reporting on the project itself. You know, what did you do? What happened? What were the outcomes of your project? The programmatic part you will be reporting on, but grants and funds management will do, here's how much we spent, here's the categories we spent it in. They will do that part of the reporting for us. The accountant that we work with is Daniel Jameson. He's in the Grants and Funds Management office in Columbia. We've been working with Daniel for years. He's great to work with. So he's the person that does all of our final reports and stuff for us. So 90 days before the end date, you should start to check that things have posted. One thing that auditors look for is that they don't want to see that a lot of the money of the grant was spent right at the end. You're not supposed to say, oh, I've got this much money left, I need to spend it out. They don't want to see that, because the logic is they think if you needed it, you should have spent it earlier in the project so that you could get the benefit of using whatever you were buying. So they don't like to see that you're spending a lot of money in the last couple of months of the grant. So you want to process any final expenses as soon as possible. Make any changes that need to be corrected. If you happen to have any outstanding travel authorizations, blanket purchase orders, any cost share, any of that kind of stuff, we want to go ahead and think about canceling those at this point, moving people back to other departments if they've been charging part of their salary to the grant. On the Grants and Funds Management webpage, they have these cool checklists that I mentioned. So they have a closeout matrix. These are all PDFs that can be downloaded. They have a, what to do 90 days before your grant ends, what to do 30 days before, and 15 days after. So these are all really helpful kind of guides to help you think about, what are some areas that might need your attention before the grant gets ready to close out. As I said, you will usually have 1 to 3 months after the grant ends before you have to submit your final report. And I talked about you'll be doing the programmatic reporting, but Grants and Funds Management will do the financial reporting. It is really important that you get your reports in a timely manner. A funding agency can say, if you don't submit your report in time, they may put a mark by USC Upstate and say, don't give grants to them. They don't turn in their reports. So we don't want that to happen. So this is why we are really saying, please copy us so that we know that you have submitted your reports. If an auditor contacts us and says, we never got the report for that grant, we can say, oh yes, here's where we know we submitted the report. So we like to have that paper trail in our email so that we can say, oh yes, we submitted it. Or if not, if it hasn't been submitted, we can definitely help to get it submitted as quickly as possible. And so please let us know if you have any questions about any of that stuff. That if you're not sure what to put in a report, we can talk to you about that as well. All right, that is all that I had. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Elaine. That was really helpful.
Good. I hope so. We have a lot of good resources, so I want to encourage people to take advantage of them. That grant dashboard report, I think, is pretty helpful. It's kind of a good, one sheet. Here's all your information about your grant. So I hope people will take advantage of that. Anything else we can address? All right. Well, I appreciate you coming, and I guess we can go ahead and stop the recording. Jennifer, thank you. Thanks very much, Alhama. Appreciate you coming, and be happy to answer any questions if you think of any afterwards that we need to address.
Thank you.
All